Okay, so we are live. Welcome to the webinar. I'm joined by a good selection of experts here. We've got Jack from the Clarus team, who's a solutions consultant, and many of our customers and prospects will see his face. We've actually been joined today by one of our partners and two representatives of it. It's Renovotec. They handle a lot of our hardware recommendations, requirements, and they make sure that our customers are well and truly up to the latest trends when it comes to hardware. So we've got Jane and Ian from the Renovotec team. The theme of today's session, it's really more about making sure that everyone's aware of the latest trends, both in terms of what's happening right now and also what's happening in the future when it comes to scanning technology and how important that scanning technology is for the warehouse. Realistically, we want to make sure that this session tackles the problem head on. We want to make sure that everyone understands the strength of having true traceability when it comes to scanning, and also make sure that both your hardware and what WMS provider work in tandem to really deliver that best-in-class service. I'll give you a bit of a breakdown in terms of what we're trying to achieve, the team, and then I'll let the other guys on the webinar introduce themselves as well. Some people might not know me. My name is Craig. I'm the COO of Clarus. My background has been heavily in marketing, operations, solutions, and support. I deal with our customers in face-to-face capacity. I also manage Jack's team as well. We've got Jack, who's one of our principal solution consultants. He is one of the guys that you'll see on site if you're on board with Clarus WMS. He really makes sure that he understands the criteria and the needs of your business and turns that into a functional piece of configuration for our system to make sure that it works for your business. I'll hand over to Jane and Ian to introduce themselves.
Hi, good afternoon. So Jamie Motstead, Technical Director at Renovotec. My background has been in logistics and warehousing for the past 25 plus years. And we're here to talk all about scanning solutions and what we're seeing in the marketplace.
Yeah, I'm Ian Joyous. I'm part of the pre-sales team here at Renovotec. I've been here for about 2 years, and I spend my time working with our customers and prospects, making sure that the technology that we suggest is the right fit for them, and that they're exploiting all possible technology solutions to get that efficiency and productivity benefits that they're looking for. Prior to Renovotec, I spent about 20 years working for a variety of mobile equipment manufacturers. I've also seen how the scanning technology has developed from a manufacturing point of view over that time as well.
Perfect. For this session, what we're going to be doing is going through a really quick outline. So the first point is going to be looking at the state of warehousing scanning as it currently stands, the best available devices in the current market today. Also looking at why the system that you choose is just as important as the hardware. Then we'll hopefully get Jack in the position to do a live demo. And then we'll finally look at the future of scanning and take any questions. Just on that point, if you've got any questions, whether you're in the webinar directly or on LinkedIn, please feel free to ask those questions as and when they pop into your head. We've got a team in the background that are looking to take those questions and feed them to the team. Okay, so moving on to point one. Over to Jamie. When we're looking at the most effective scanning solutions for warehouses, whether that be e-com, cold storage, 3PLs, what's the kind of technology you tend to see people picking up straight away?
So we're sat in the innovations center here, and there's a huge range of technology around us. And there's technology that suits different situations particularly well. Within a cold storage facility, you might be using something different as you might be doing in a fast-paced picking environment. I will say there is a breadth of technology that will fit certain individual scenarios perfectly. But one of the things that we've probably seen a lot of recently is a trend for customers to try and minimize the number of different types of devices that they use. So one of the technology changes over the last few years has been the ability for one device to be a reasonably good fit for different parts of a warehouse process and being accessorized with arm mounts, wearable equipment to be able to be used for goods in, picking, put away, and other processes. Whereas if you'd step back a few years, you would potentially have seen different pieces of technology in those areas. And obviously different pieces of technology would mean different batteries, different cradles, different ways of managing them. So one thing that we've definitely seen in terms of the actual kit running most of our customers' warehouses is a drive from the IT side of their businesses to try and minimize the number of devices that they have to support. And that's been possible through the changes with the manufacturers, producing scanning engines which will scan longer ranges and producing devices which are all touchscreen, which are much more rugged and suitable to warehouse operations as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. What we're seeing in that area, the first thing that we need to do is understand that particular customer's operation, because we need to understand how that device is used. And by working closely with Clarus, we're able to do that. So understanding the environment that the device is going to be used in, understanding the ergonomics and then the requirements. We mentioned a cold store, wearing gloves, wearing wearable devices as opposed to maybe a pistol grip style solution. And then more importantly, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a short while, is the data that's required to be captured. You know, we're seeing the trend that more and more data is being required. The changes that go into GS1 barcodes in the retail space in the coming years are driving that requirement from a device perspective. But yes, the trend is to make sure that we have one device that an operation can support, and as Ian quite rightly says, accessorize that accordingly.
Yeah, I do. You raised two really good points there. It'd be good to get a bit more of a deep dive on. One aspect of that would be, do you think that the demand from a consumer point of view is kind of pushing the market when it comes to scanners? We're seeing a lot more kind of Android high-spec devices coming through. A lot of them are using things like USB-C that are frequently available now. Is that a trend that you guys are seeing that is, you know, it's been more and more adopted by these large players in the scanning market?
If you'd gone back a few years, you would have seen a range of different operating systems in these environments. It's now almost entirely going to be an Android-driven environment, but it does mean that we do come across customers who will ask the question as to what's the difference between a consumer Android device versus an enterprise-capable device that you might be suggesting for an environment as well. Consumer devices typically don't have a true scanning engine on them, so they can't scan from the same distances or as rapidly as an enterprise device. They don't necessarily have the same lifespan as an enterprise device. You know, if you're deploying a device into a warehouse, you want that device to be in there for 3-5 years. And in year 3, year 4, you might want to add another 2 units to that. You want to be able to get an identical unit into that so it fits with the accessories that you have on site. And if you look at the consumer world, none of that is possible. Consumer manufacturers will typically make a device until at some point in the sales cycle, they will stop making it and it becomes an end of supported device. Whereas with the devices that we supply, they have a defined life cycle, typically 3-5 years, and they have a defined support period, even after the end of that sales cycle. So even if you were the last customer to buy that particular device, you could still be assured that you would have that 3 or 4 years or 5 years life cycle out of that device, fully supported, both from a hardware point of view, but I guess more importantly, when we're talking about Android, it needs to be fully supported from a software point of view as well in terms of patching, because these are devices which would have typically patches released by Android on a monthly basis. Cybersecurity is top of everybody's concerns at the moment, and you need to be comfortable that the device that you're going to be putting into your environment is going to be physically supported from a hardware point of view, but also supported in terms of patching to make sure that your environment stays safe in 3, 4, 5 years' time when you're still using those devices.
Yeah, and I think just to add to what Ian's saying, yeah, what we're seeing in terms of the product moving forward, absolutely those scan engines are critical to business operations, but now we're also seeing a move towards images to be able to take more data, more information from that more traditional barcode, if you like, to that 2D barcode that I mentioned previously. That's been triggered by huge amounts of legislation. That's been triggered by things like farm to fork in terms of that traceability of batch information that may come through. All of that information now being made available to be then managed and supported in the WMS in the background as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing a lot more options, but equally the kind of breadth seems to have narrowed, but the quality is it's far beyond anything you see from a consumer market. We often get the challenge, why could we not just use our personal devices to operate this? You said the lifespan just isn't there. The other thing that you mentioned earlier on, Ian, I think was the wearable I think that's something that a lot of people are particularly interested in. I guess one of the questions that we always get as a software provider that doesn't really have any direct expertise in hardware is, what kind of benefit do we have from the new market of wearables, and what's the training times? Are going to be like an increase in having that delay while people are training on board with that new hardware?
Yeah, so when we talk about wearable technology, we've definitely seen a trend towards one device that will do multiple things, and one device that would be typically worn on the arm, paired with a Bluetooth scanner. The benefit of that is that person's hands are free. So if you're having to move product or pick products, it can save seconds per individual pick if you don't have to pick up and put down a device. In terms of the change in devices, because we're looking now at a standard full screen device on the arm, they typically have larger screens than you would have seen in wearable devices if you'd step back a few years. If you step back a relatively small screen on a wearable device, which could make it very difficult for a user to actually use in terms of all day, every day, being able to see what they need to see on screen. Now, with the current enterprise Android devices, we're talking about having a screen on the arm, giving you effectively the same display as you would use if you're using a device with a pistol grip, but rotated into that landscape mode. Relatively straightforward to do with most modern WMS vendors. What that allows then is to have a relatively smooth transition for some users using a device with a trigger grip in some parts, other users where it's more suitable for the ergonomics of what they're trying to do, having the device on the arm with the Bluetooth scanner. I think that tends to mean a relatively fast take up in terms of training time now. And from some of the visits that we do with customers, once we get a user with a device on their arm, a Bluetooth scanner either on their finger or on the back of their hand, their general job profile means that they're having to pick up and handle products and move products and pack items. They see the benefit almost immediately in terms of the usability of the device, because they've all experienced problems with putting a device down, forgetting where they put it, not being able to see the screen, and having to go back to repeat things. So we tend to find that the take-up of wearable devices with the current generation is probably far better than it has been at any point in the past.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, the ergonomics is critical to the operation. I think where the manufacturers have listened to the consumers, the people that are doing this type of work on a day-to-day basis, is also making ergonomics a lot closer to the arm as well, a lot more sort of realistic rather than protruding off the arm, that maybe that's where somewhere would be able to get caught. The screen real estate is absolutely critical. Ian's already alluded to that, where previously you may have had a keyboard which would attach to the side of that screen that then limited the amount of information that would be able to be seen. That's really important. But again, that ergonomics of being able to use a hot swap battery whilst it's on the arm, so not having to take all of that off and go and make that change, being able to do that whilst it's in situ, again, saves those small amount of time, those minutes. That means that the operator is more productive.
And this is the point at which those user trials and tests that we do with our customers become so important, because there is such a different range of accessories and mounts. Doing that extra piece of work and making sure that the accessories are a good fit for what they're being used for, it makes all the difference to how things get adapted and adopted by the users when we go live.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we've saw our side is that you're almost getting a similar kind of benefit from moving from a paper-based system to a scan-first system as you are when you start adopting wearables. And you're talking from a traceability point of view, the first step is obviously critical, but the second step towards wearables, you're talking seconds per scan, action points and processes. You might be losing a couple of seconds per action, but when you're talking the volumes that we do in warehousing, those times quickly escalate. And we all know, pretty much everyone in this webinar will know that the true cost of warehousing is making sure that your people are efficient. Headcount, one of the most expensive aspects of doing any kind of warehouse. I want to make sure that the people that you've got in are doing the most for the time that you've got them. Just moving on then, we've got a poll that's about to go up, and it's basically around barriers to adoption. So the question is, what's your biggest challenge when it comes to scanning? The answers are, or the options are, is it user adoption? Is it the hardware limitations? Is it the system integrations and issues around that? Or is it cost and ROI concerns? So I'm going to put that up as a poll. Feel free to cast your vote, but also We haven't had any questions so far. So again, if you've got any questions, please feel free to drop them in as and when we think of them. If we don't have any towards the end, we'll hold off for another couple of minutes and see if we get any input. Okay, so moving into the next section, we're going to look at the system side. Obviously, you can have the best scanner in the world, but if you don't have a system that can actually handle that input, it's effectively useless. What we're going to focus on this particular section is how important that integration is, to make sure the hardware performs just as well as the software, and the capability together gives you the solution you're looking for. So I guess the real question here, from your point of view, Jamie, is what's the kind of common challenges that you see when you first bring in your hardware tech, and in terms of integration and application?
You know, in terms of integration, I think it's about making sure that we're making the right choice. The hardware we're putting in is fit for purpose, and we are able to make sure that application that's communicating back to the WMS is in place, is easy to use. The economics of the product is, you know, is correct, and making sure that that ease of use for the operator. You know, we mentioned at the very beginning, you know, the commercial grade devices that Ian's referred to. We're all used to running applications on our own personal devices, making that as user-friendly and intuitive as possible for the operator on the shop floor, you know, it is really important. Yes, we want to give them choices about how that looks and feels on device, but making sure that that's locked down enough to ensure that the application is running to its optimum level.
Yeah, it's a good point, Jamie. And one of the things we often talk about with customers is making sure that those devices are available and working when they pick them up. So we've seen a lot of implementations of intelligent lockers or intelligent cabinets, so that when a user starts a shift, they're comfortable that they're going to pick up a device that's fully charged, it's going to last the whole shift, it has no faults, and they can go and get on with their work. It's a part about making the data capture part of their work as frictionless as possible. So they can just get on with the workflow that they're doing, and they're capturing data as easily as possible along the way. And that means a reliable device will last a full shift. And when we're looking at how we lock that unit down, so it only shows the WMS screen that you need to see, and that we can format the screen from what we can do to give the user the best possible experience in terms of what they can see and what they can use on screen.
Yeah, exactly. The real kind of benefit to our partnership is that we tend to avoid the mismatch kind of horror stories that you hear early on. When we were doing our first wave of implementations, you'd get the odd instance of someone that pre-bought hardware from a third party that wasn't configured, it wasn't ready to go. In some cases, it didn't suit. We've had many instances where people are doing something like temperature controlled cold storage and have not realised actually the gloves they have of harbouring the small real estate they've got for the scanning module. And it's good to be able to rely on the partner that we know that our software is extremely configurable, and if our customers get their hardware through themselves, that they've got that industry knowledge to fall back on. If there's an issue, they can go back to yourselves and get it reconfigured, get the support they need effectively. I guess the main aspect here is that, you know, coming from a modern WMS platform, we're looking to eliminate as much friction as possible, and we're only as good as the hardware that we're running on. So, you know, it's great having the breadth and breadth of functionality that we've got, especially in our workflow tool that Jack's going to be showing off. But if you physically can't touch the screen to do the additional inputs as well as the scanning, then you've kind of lost the battle when we're talking saving seconds in scans, but then potentially spending 30 to a minute doing additional inputs because we haven't thought about the process and the actual flow of putting that data into the system. I guess to James' point, right, it should feel effortless, but it should be part of the same process, and everything, when we can, we should be eliminating friction points. It's really good to get you into that one, guys. We've got another poll that's going to go live. I'm going to look at the question, which is, and this one's about system checking. So what we want to do is just get a feel for the people in the room at the minute. And the question is, how confident are you that your current WMS supports your scanning needs effectively? And the answer is pretty straightforward. We've got to very confident, somewhat confident, not confident, and we don't actually do any scanning. I like the sound of everything that the guys have said so far. Feel free to reach out to us at any point. We can definitely help in that scenario. the polls don't look like they're working at the minute. So we'll try and push them on after the fact. It'd be good to get your feedback from everyone in the room. We're going to go into the next section, which is the live demo.
You hear me?
We can. Success.
Great. I'm going to be demonstrating the handheld device workflow builder, so implementation builder, and then I'm also going to demo image capture functionality. So just going to share my screen. All good, you can see that, that's great. So I take us over to the implementation builder, and what I'm going to demonstrate and talk you through is how I've added image capture functionality to this implementation. And I've done it, I did it previously moments ago. It takes me roughly around 5 to 10 minutes to add this configuration in and then deploy it live to the handheld device. So there's no developer needed, there's no development time. I can add these components into the handheld device implementation and then set it live for our handheld devices to use instantly. So the first thing I've added is the image capture component. What this allows me to do on the handheld device is capture the image and take a photo of what I'm receiving in. So the picture I can take is of the products on the pallet, which is really good if you need to use it for evidence for your customer. Okay, this is how it came in. If it was damaged, this is what it looked like when it turned up from your supplier or turned up on the trailer. The next task or component that I've added in is the receive of a task. And this allows me to upload the picture to the specific task that I'm working on. And then the next one is upload the image file. So that picture that I take on the handheld device, and that I'll show you in a moment, loaded to the task that I've been working on, and you can actually have up to 10 images per task. So that's really good. That allows you to take basically as many images as you want. You're not going to need to take more than 10 images of the product. But yeah, that's a really good feature. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to save this, and you'll be able to see how quickly it goes through. So I've saved this. This is now on my implementation. So this is my pre-receipt that I've created, PO02. And then I've added, you'll see in a moment, or you may be able to see already, I've got a large wooden box on a pallet. So I've got one wooden box. That's what I expect to receive it. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen on here, so that you can focus on me in this camera. So I've just jumped onto the handheld device. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to select receipt and then pre-receipt receive. I'm going to type in my reference that I've just created on my laptop. So the first step is to scan the product code. So I've got a product barcode down on the box down there, if you can see that, and it's picked it up perfectly. I can then jump through to the next step, which will be inputting the quantity of the product on the pallet. So I have one large wooden box on the pallet, so one product on the pallet, and you can see that there. I'm going to press next, and then there's the image capture functionality popping up. If the camera focuses, there we go. I'm going to press capture image. It instantly opens the camera, so you'll probably see me. I'm going to take a picture of my box on the pallet. That picture's been taken now. I can get a little preview of the photo I've taken, press confirm, and then the next step is enter how many pallets are like this. So I've got one pallet or storage unit, whatever you may call it. And then I'm going to jump through to finalize my receipt. So that's the next step. So if I go back over now to my receipt. So back to my pre-receipt now. You can see that the status has changed to part. If I scroll down to the receive line, you can see my wooden box, and you can see a little attachment folder button in the bottom right corner. So I'm going to press that. And that is in fact the photo that I've taken on the device a couple moments ago. You can see that's gone straight through onto the task line, and you can use that as evidence then, and you can see what your warehouse operative has actually received in the warehouse. So that's really good. Great piece of evidence. And as I said, you can have up to 10 photos as part of that workflow.
I think that the main thing to raise here is just the speed. Obviously, that was a demonstration where Jack's taking time to talk through every aspect and every click. There isn't many people that would type in the number one and then show it to everyone to make sure they've done it. So you can get a real feel for how quick this process could be. But then equally, I guess from a software point of view, the real kind of shining star here is the fact that you can go in there and change that on the fly within 5-10 minutes. So if you have a new customer or a potential customer and they have specific requirements, let's say they are in electronics, they require serialization, then they also want you to take photos of inbound to make sure that it's been received from their manufacturing partner in the right kind of standards. Obviously, with our system, you'll be able to set that up yourselves, but equally, you'll be able to say in that pitch that you can definitely achieve what they're trying to do. And from a system point of view, it's relatively straightforward. And again, process point of view, it's nice and easy for the guys on the warehouse floor to actually implement.
I just wanted to add on there as well. I've added the implementation of image capture in between my entering my product quantity and also before putting the pallet quantity in. You can have that wherever you want, basically, within that receipt flow. It just made sense for me to put it in at that step. But we've also had customers use it during the put away flow to ensure that the operatives are putting the pallets into the right place. We've also used it in the dispatch flow. So people have taken a picture of the final trailer and what that looks like. So they can send that through to their customer to show, okay, this is what the trailer is going to look like when it arrives, or this is what it looks like when we've dispatched it to your warehouse. But it is a really good tool for backing your workflows up with evidence.
Absolutely. And I guess that kind of falls back to the idea that everyone knows in our industry that the most expensive resource is human resource. So making sure that you've got the ability to do the flows that you're expecting to do in an efficient way. But then also on the flip side is making sure that if there is, for example, agency staff that come in, you can put additional steps in. Like Jack just said on the put away task, we can make sure that they're taking a photo of the put away so that the agency staff are proving as well as a scan. Because as good as scanning is, there is ways to get around it potentially, especially with human input. But using a scan and then photo to reference that and reinforce that is really kind of the belts and braces approach to what you might want to do if you were hiring third-party staff. Within busy periods such as peak. Thanks a lot for the demo, Jack. There's a question out there which basically says, how quickly can you create or update workflows in your current system? In minutes, hours, days, or realistically it requires IT or third-party support? So we're talking weeks, months at that point. We should be getting some feedback on that one. Hopefully that's live. What we're going to move to now is the future of scanning. So back over to Jamie and Ian. I guess the big question that a lot of people that are joining this webinar are asking are, well, what's next? We've seen scanners progressing, the accessories for scanners progressing. We're starting to see affordable wearable tech that is actually going to benefit us. What's the next step?
I think probably there is multiple different areas to sort of focus on. Maybe it's never a presentation or any kind of webinar without mentioning AI. So let's start there. I think the next step in the chipset on hardware is to then be able to harness the use of AI at a device level, which then using the software from the WMS can then stop that sort of round trip, if you like, of scanning a bit of information to then come back on the example that we've just seen of the image that's been taken. Maybe then there's some additional information or an inspection of that product that needs to take place at that time. So the capability of the chipset to be able to harness the power of AI and stop that sort of round trip that's coming back. That's certainly what most of our manufacturing partners that we're dealing with are talking about in the coming months.
Yeah, and with those devices having those capabilities, we have the possibility of doing much more complex image processing on the device, which could be object recognition. It could be enhancing an augmented reality, as in I'm going to pick an item. Is this the item? And the actual device is recognizing the item. So we're seeing elements of that at the moment within fixed industrial scanning, where we have a more powerful fixed scanner on a packing bench for shipping or returns, where we can start reading the text from labels or return notes. And then we can learn over time how that text is shaped so that we can improve performance of that recognition. We see it within retail environments where they've started to look at object recognition going through their checkouts. Some of that technology could bleed over into the warehouse space. Another aspect that could bleed over from the retail is using the device in the warehouse as the sort of entry point to an AI agent. That is, I have a query, I have a problem. Rather than find a supervisor, can I ask an AI agent that's trained on the customer's data about how to handle a return or something that has been misplaced and get instructions, the next step I need to do? So that sort of exists in a very nebulous form within some of the retailers at the moment. But often what we see starting in retail with some of the very large retailers makes its way into the supply chain space over time. So certainly image processing, access to AI agents are certainly two of the areas that we're probably going to see a little bit more of.
And I think it comes back to what we were saying at the beginning, those accessories. So access to those fixed industrial scanners through the devices that you have currently in place, maybe through a docking station, using some kind of automation wedge software means that one single device could be used to access a more powerful fixed industrial scanner to make use of it and be able to work at a much higher pace.
Yeah, exactly. It's great to see ourselves. We're working on an AI assistant at the minute that's in beta phase, and I'm sure we're going to showcase that in a webinar in the future. But again, yeah, to your point, it's making sure that, if there's that knowledge held within your business, can it be utilized quickly? And again, it's exactly the same as the scanning points. If we're looking for marginal gains on scanning equipment, then having someone run around a warehouse 15 minutes trying to find their manager just feels crazy. It's almost an alien concept when we're talking about efficiency gains. So it'd be good to see how the hardware AI chipset works with software AI, obviously being cloud native ourselves and having the infrastructure ready. It'd be good to understand what we can leverage and make sure that that hardware is fully utilized so that we can effectively make the AI solution that we're developing even better. Is there anything that your customers are asking for that's not possible yet that they would like to see?
I think it's probably a difficult question because it will all depend on the environment. It'll all depend on the product set that we have at the moment. I think that the movement towards the GS1 QR code is going to open up a huge amount of information, that data that's available. Yes, we can scan multiple barcodes. We can identify individual barcodes based on image sets. There's a huge amount that's coming from that. It's about making sure probably harnessing that data is probably the key word at the moment. The way we're solving a lot of problems at the moment is that accessorized piece that we're talking about without trying to make, operators on the shop floor look like RoboCop with all kinds of different attachments on their person. It's about making sure that they're using the equipment to the best of its ability and using the WMS software to lead that. Because I think it's the important thing here is that you manage things in one place. The device becomes the execution element from the WMS. That's where we see the best types of solutions. So I know I've probably sound like a politician or spun that question on its head, but that's what we see that's done really well. The challenge, I suppose, comes with the more complex solutions when multiple different processes need to be handled by one device. How do you simplify that? I might come back to the point that make the software control that as much as possible. The hardware then becomes that execution element of that.
Yeah, I guess if we're asking for what customers want that isn't available, it is that perfect facility where nobody needs to touch anything. Everything is recorded inbound, automatically picked, packed, and shipped. Not there, but if you choose the right technology, then the basis that you might be doing handheld scanning with today could be the same device that you could have with RFID. So you could then book in 20 pallets without any effort at all, just walking down the line and scanning them. Or you need to think about what you want to deploy, think about where you want to be in 2, 3, 4 years' time, and make sure that the technology that you're deploying today has some of those capabilities so that you can add in the RFID solution, the fixed RFID solution, the fixed industrial scanning elements. So yes, the customers do ask sometimes for the impossible warehouse where everything just flows and no one touches anything. But some of those steps along the way are there.
Yeah, I guess it's what you've both been saying for the last little while, that we're getting closer. Every time there's a new release for a new way of working, RFID obviously is a massive step forward, but equally just having to access on a barcode to be able to ingest that much more data gets it in that extra step forward. You know, we're already seeing customers that are using QR codes and effectively making a blind receipt not so blind. So, you know, it's a great step in the right direction. Okay, so just as we close, I guess, first of all, I want to say thank you for your time. It's great to get some insight that's not just from within our business, but, you know, some partner insight and specifically on your niche as well, because I know a lot of people, both in our customer base and people that might be on this just out of interest, will have some real drive to figure out what's actually happening in that hardware space. As I close off the questions, I guess there's one more question that I would like to ask for both of yourselves, Jamie and Ian, and that is, if someone came to you and asked you for your 5 seconds, 10 seconds of advice of what should I be looking at, what should I be doing if I, let's say, operate a 3PL or a warehouse, what would you suggest to them?
From a hardware perspective, I suppose it's the one eye on the future in terms of which is here and now is harnessing that data. How do we make sure, and I'm not going to talk about the QR codes previously, but making sure that they have the sort of best breed that is capable of, you know, of being around. Ian's quite rightly said, you know, the vast majority will be a 3+3 or 4+4 year availability in terms of support and moving forward. We live in this world where we're all ultra careful from a cybersecurity perspective. It's making sure that not only have you made the choice for the right kit, but then that hardware then is supported, that patching is making sure we're keeping it up to date. So we've got the latest and greatest. And this is why we work so closely and so well with Clarus, because we can be suggesting a brand new firmware update from one of our manufacturing partners. But we've got to make sure that your software is capable of working on that platform. And that's where we work very closely together to make sure that we can keep your hardware as secure as it possibly can be by making sure patches are kept up to date, and we'll make recommendations on that, but also working closely with you guys so there is, you know, that your software is able to work on that device as well. And just to sort of conclude as well, it isn't, you know, if, as and when we do come across issues, it isn't a finger pointing exercise that says that's a software problem or that's an RF problem or that's a device problem. It's about us understanding where everything fits in, roles and responsibility, and we can get those devices back up and working as quick as possible.
Agree with Jamie there. I think it's definitely about having an eye on the future when you're looking at deploying the hardware. I think in the same way that if you're looking at a software provider, you want to have a software provider that can build a new workflow and deploy it rapidly. What we want to do is our customers to choose the core set of hardware that will be there for the 5 years and be capable of what future enhancements they want to put in place. So working with us to choose the right bit of hardware now, which can then become the RFID hardware or the hardware running fixed workstations for scanning or packing in the future. It's making sure that that investment, which is significant for our customers, is used throughout the whole of its life, and we can just add to it. We don't need to replace it. So it's understanding current requirements, but also understanding where you might want to be in 5 years' time and making sure that we can explain the steps along the way to get there.
I think really, to just one last thing, really good example is exactly what Jack's shown in his demo. You know, maybe the requirement for the device, you know, prior to that was to not give access to the camera. You didn't want the device memory being logged with people taking images that weren't required. Now being able to give access to the device or the camera to be used at certain points in the process, you know, is a really good example of that kind of making sure that the device is fit for purpose, is ready, and can harness all of the future enhancements that come from Clarus WMS.
Yeah, that's I guess the point I would echo. When you look at a software like ourselves that's releasing on average about 7 times a day, if you've got hardware that isn't able to do that 3-year, 5-year life cycle and keep up with the scope of new changes, especially when we look at things like AI that's moving at ridiculous pace. It could be a real downfall for the business, and to make sure that they're making that choice both from a software provider, but also from a hardware point of view, with not just an eye on what they need now to gain efficiency, but also what's the aspirations for the future. We have a lot of conversations that they always start with how do we get efficiency gains now? How do we increase traceability? One of the things that's left on the table quite often is how do we react to potential opportunities in our business, in our space. Margins are getting tighter. It's a lot harder to operate and it's a lot harder to grow. So having that hardware that's going to provide the perfect platform for the software to shine and let you say yes to more prospects, and therefore yes to more revenue, is ultimately the goal for most of the people I think sitting in this room. So once again, thanks a lot for your time, guys. What I'm going to do is hand over to Jack, who's got some results for the polls that we ran throughout the session.
Yeah, so the first question was, do you currently use handheld scanning in your warehouse? We've got 56% of voted yes daily across operations. We've got 12% that voted yes, but only in some areas, and quite, well, not surprisingly, because we expected it a little bit, but we've got 31% of votes that is no, but applying to introduce it soon, which is really good. And hopefully this call has been really beneficial to you to see how you can improve that or introduce that into your warehouse. And also really good to see that 0% votes for no, and we're not considering it. So that's the first result. I believe that's been posted so everyone can see it. So the second poll was, what's your biggest challenge when it comes to scanning? So the winner of that was, we had 45% of votes was system integration issues. 36% of votes went to training and user adoption, and 18% went to cost and ROI concerns. I think system integration issues being the biggest leader. We've mentioned a lot today about the support from both Renovotec and ourselves at Clarus. There's always support on hand to help with those issues. And as a solutions consultant, it's all about dedicating the time to training the users to make sure that those issues are ironed out during the testing phase of the process. And then when we come to live, we've seen all the issues before and we can just focus on going live.
Equally, I think when you're looking at scanning as well, one of the things to consider is a lot of providers will have a proprietary app that either downloaded from the App Store or from Google Play if it's an Android device. Integration tends to be more of an issue if it's a proprietary device. One of the pitches that I would always kind of bang my door about with Clarus is that we are browser native. So you can, in theory, run it through any software so long as it has access to some kind of internet. So Wi-Fi or 5G, 4G even works, and some kind of browser. We actually backwards developed our platform to run right down to kind of old Microsoft CE browsers. So that's one of the key aspects, I guess, that is something to consider when you're looking at WMS providers. Have we got any more polls, Jack?
The last question was, what's your biggest challenge when it comes to scanning? Oh no, that was the one we've just jumped on. So how quickly can you create or update workflows in your current setup? So we've got 20% what voted within minutes, but the winner of the poll was it requires IT or a third-party support, which is 80% of people voted that. You saw it in my demonstration. As soon as I pressed save on the implementation, that went through to my handheld device and I was able to use that as the workflow demonstration. So the actual deployment and putting that live was really quick. But as I stated in my demo as well, it took around 5 to 10 minutes. I wasn't timing it, but yeah, it's 5 to 10 minutes to get that image capture live, tested, and then demonstrated for you guys. So it's a really, really sharp turnaround.
Yeah, and on the back of that, we might have some people that work in IT or security. We have two ways to control this mechanism as well. So obviously Jack's got full admin access, but we have role-based permissions. So we can make sure that certain users can only do these changes and a wholesale change. And equally, if you were going to be someone that was working with us and looking to do that quite regularly, we'd always push you towards a safe mirror environment to make sure that you're doing changes and testing somewhere completely isolated. And then when you're happy, we can push that change to your production. So rather than being reliant on development, effectively what we do is just provide that safety blanket. Just to wrap up, I'll just ask one final time to see if we've got any more questions. I think we've got one or two questions that has come through so far. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to put them either in the webinar or live on LinkedIn, and we've got a couple of minutes where we can answer them. I think we've got one question that's just coming through.
So we've had a question from Glenn. We've seen an increase in inquiries for RFID. HHD can bring accuracy rates upwards of 99%. So the gains from RFID means you need massive throughput to get an ROI. What's your thoughts and opinions on RFID?
Well, I'll have a go at that one if you like. I mean, joking aside, we've always said that this year is the year of RFID, probably for the last sort of 15 to 20 years. We are seeing big gains in that area. Again, it comes back down to the use case that we're talking about, whether you have a master container ID that you're looking to track at a pallet level, or whether it's unique consignment items that you're looking to track at an individual layer. You have a tote with 40 items in there and you want to track all the 40 items inside there, then obviously the use case is there, the return on investment. But again, it comes back to the requirement, and whether that's a handheld device or near field RFID tracking, or whether you're using fixing RFID readers alongside a conveyor to make a tunnel effect. It does pretty much come back down to that kind of use case. We are seeing the increased popularity of RFID because of the reduction in cost of the label. That is a key trigger and a key fact that's making people look at RFID again that they may have looked at 4 or 5 years ago and was cost prohibited because of the cost of that label. Maybe they didn't have full control over that production area as well. So that supplier compliance piece comes in. It's a difficult one to answer because without generalizing, we are seeing a lot more people looking at it. We are seeing a lot more uptake in that area, but it does depend on supplier compliance. It does depend on that supplier control, and it also depends on exactly what you want to track that has an RFID label.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. If you've got 99% accuracy, what is the cost of that other 1%? It might well be in your 99.x, but if the cost of a failure is significant, it can still be worthwhile looking at having something like RFID being an additional layer to make sure that you deliver to a customer, supplier compliance is correct. The cost of entry from labels is lower. We spoke about choosing the right sort of hardware devices for general warehouse use. You choose the right device, turning it into an RFID device is just an XR. It's not buying a new device. The cost of entry has certainly come down over the last few years. And so, again, without looking at that individual case, it's certainly something that I think most customers should plan to have the hardware that is capable of doing. And it becomes then easy to do some tests and some trials and to see what benefits you are going to achieve.
Absolutely, completely echo that. I think the one thing you'd look at from a commercial point of view is just the buyback time on any decision, whether that be moving to scanning, moving to wearables, moving to RFID. I guess there's 2 points on that one. The first one is obviously the buyback time. So how much does it cost to entry versus how much are you actually doing this throughput? So I guess, Glenn, to your original point, if you've got massive volume, your throughput time is going to be phenomenal, and therefore the cost to retain your initial investment and therefore going to a positive ROI will be, probably weeks. The second part of that, I guess, is what's happening not just in your particular use case in your warehouse, but also your use case in terms of upstream. Ian, you mentioned it, but if you've got a manufacturing facility and that you buy from and they're not ready for RFID, then it's kind of a moot point. So making sure that your providers, your facilitators, your suppliers, your customers are RFID ready before you look at committing that additional cost to potentially gain the reward. But I would always kind of advise when I'm talking to prospects and customers alike, it's best to start with something that you know you're going to have a lot of volume. So people always move to scanning first, get barcodes in. From barcodes, look to things like wearables, where you get an increased efficiency gains through speed and reaction time, process management through choosing the right provider from a WS point of view. And then finally, that it's those tiny marginal gains. So when you start to become, almost like an F1 team looking for the quick wins. So RFID in terms of e-commerce or clothing, for example, it's an obvious win, because if things can be soft tagged at manufacturing, you could be counting hundreds of items in seconds rather than hoping that a label has been correct and the machine on the other side that's been packing that box has correctly put the right amount of materials in that box. Thanks a lot, guys. Have we got any more questions? I can't see any come through. No more questions. Okay, so at that point, I'm going to wrap up. Just once again, say thanks a lot for the guys at Renovotec's Innovation Centre. Thank you to Jamie and Ian, and also thank you to Jack for doing the demo and gracing us with his accent. At that point, we'll say thanks a lot. We'll see you soon with another webinar, and we've got a lot of exciting things happening from Clarus' point of view in the next 12 months. Principally AI. Please keep your eyes peeled for the release of that information, and you will see it on our LinkedIn channel very soon. Thanks a lot for your time. Bye.